Hello everyone, this is Viktor Michalevsky and part 2 of our series on positional sacrifice. For those who don't know, I'm a grandmaster from Israel, a bronze medalist in the 2010 Olympiad. Okay, today I'm going to show you another game against international master Alex Rabinovich. And a similar opening line which happened in the first game. d4, d5, c4, c6, knight f3, e6, g3, d takes c4. So this is the first positional sacrifice of a pawn. It also happened in the previous game. Now white gets positional initiative, having in mind strong bishop on g2 and the potentially strong center with the pawns on d4, e4. The knight will go to e5 and white will put pressure on black's position. So let's see how it goes. Bishop g2, b5. Black is trying to keep his extra pawn on c4, and the light squared bishop will be developed to b7. Short castle, knight d7, a4. White starts to put pressure on the black's queen side. Knight c3 is coming. Bishop b7. Knight c3. This position occurred also in the first game against Alex. And right after the game, I explained to him that his move b4 was inaccurate. And so in the second game, he played the right move a6. This way he keeps his pawn on b5 and doesn't weaken his c4 pawn as he did in the previous game. Knight e5. So white is starting to put pressure on black's position. The c6 pawn is now hanging. In case of knight takes e5, d takes e5, black has some problems with the king side, even though right now this is the main line. Instead, Alex played knight e7, which back then used to be the main line. The point is to protect the c6 pawn, and then to exchange the knights on e5 and play knight d5. This way black closes my pressure along the a8 h1 diagonal and keeps developing with an extra pawn. So right before the game I prepared an improvement on the known theory in this line. Earlier white played a takes b5, a takes b5, rook takes a8, bishop takes a8, knight takes d7, queen takes d7, knight takes b5, c takes b5, and bishop takes a8. So white wins back a pawn, but black obtains a good position. That's what happened in a couple of games, and so I prepared an improvement for white. I'll give you a few minutes to think about the position, and then I'm going to show you the move which I played. It might be a shock for some of the spectators, and it was definitely a shock for my opponent. I played knight takes f7. So Alex was really shocked, because a similar sacrifice on f7 occurred in the previous game. Now it came completely unexpected. White sacrifices his knight for long-term compensation. So here my opponent took at least 10 minutes to make his only possible move, king takes f7. And it happened just because the similar sacrifice occurred in our previous game. So he was really shocked when he saw knight takes f7 on the board. Knight e4. White slowly brings his knight into the game. Knight d6 is one threat with a double attack on f7 and b7. Another threat is knight g5 check, trying to win the e6 pawn. So as you can see, the idea is kind of similar to the previous game, but here it's much less obvious. So Alex played king g8. There are a few other possible moves in the position, but this is one of the reasonable moves. So king g8, and then another quiet move, knight g5. This sacrifice was possible because black's pieces are really bad, especially the knight on e7 is on the way of his bishop. His pieces looks really ugly, and that's how I come to this positional sacrifice. So black cannot really protect the e6 pawn, and so he played knight f6. Now the immediate knight takes e6 is not so good. Black can just play queen d6. And it's not easy to prove that white has enough for the sacrificed piece. So I played a takes b5. In fact, I was still in my home preparation. White's idea is to meet a takes b5 with an extremely strong move bishop h3. Suddenly white is threatening with mate in 1, bishop takes e6, and the exchange on b5 was made in order to prevent bishop c8 move. Now white can simply grab the a8 rook. So it turns out that black doesn't have a good defense against bishop takes e6. And so he decided not to play a takes b5. Instead he played bishop c8, which is in fact also a dubious move. Because now white can simply take another pawn on c6. B takes c6. Moreover, white creates a threat of c7 with a discovery on a8. So black has to move his rook, rook a7. So white already has 2 pawns for the sacrificed piece. And so I decided I can pick up the c4 pawn, and with 3 pawns and potentially strong center, I have more than enough. So I played rook a4. h6. This move makes sense because the knight on g5 is very active, so he's trying to attack my active piece. Knight h3. Knight f3 was equally good, but I decided I want to keep my pawn on c6. So g5. This is a really interesting idea. Alex prevents knight f4 ideas and prepares also rook h7. So his rook is going to play on the 7th rank. After he moves his knight from e7, the rooks will be connected. And so he may get some play. I just picked up the c4 pawn. Rook takes c4. Rook h7. Black brings his rook. Okay, now white has 3 pawns for the piece and can simply improve his position. So I played e4, taking the center with my pawns. Another option would have been playing f4 first, and after g4, knight f2, with the following e4. So e4, a5. Black is trying to untangle his position. Bishop a6 is coming with the pin along the a6 f1 diagonal. So I just decided to move my rooks from the diagonal by playing rook e1, bishop a6, rook c3, knight c8. Black untangles his position nicely. Now all of his pieces seem to play. The bishop on a6 is pretty strong on this diagonal. The bishop from f8 is threatening to come to b4 to pin my rooks again. But here I spotted a weak point in black's position, which is the e6 pawn. And so I decided I can sacrifice another exchange and simply attack the e6 pawn. So I played queen b3. Bishop b4. Blacks accept the challenge. Probably it would be safer instead to protect the e6 pawn, but white's position is already clearly better. For instance, if black plays queen e8, protecting the e6 pawn, then I can do e5. There are no good retreats of the knight, so knight d5, bishop takes, e takes, queen takes, and white is clearly better with 4 pawns for a piece. So we'll go back to the game. Bishop b4 was played. Queen takes e6 check, king h8. Now another interesting moment in the game. After bishop b4, black is going to win an exchange. I'm already a piece down, so eventually I'll end up rook down. So what I'm going to do here in this position? Of course, I'm going to sacrifice another piece on g5. Probably Tarash would be happy since this game, as white is going to get 7 protected passed pawns. Black played bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and rook h to g7. In case he takes the knight on g5, h takes g5. I take back with my bishop. Now black has a rook and piece up, but this pin along the d8 h4 diagonal is extremely strong, and white is going to win back all the material. For instance, rook f7, e5, bishop takes f6 is coming, and black is just lost. So instead of capturing the knight, black played rook h to g7, queen h3, another precise move. White creates 2 threats. First, queen takes h6 check, and second, knight e6 with a double attack on g7 and d8. Rook g6. Black protects the h6 pawn and takes his rook away from a fork on e6. Still knight e6. The queen has to move, queen e8, and now knight f4. Simply attacking the rook on g6. If the rook moves, I am going to pick up the h6 pawn, obtaining 7 protected passed pawns. If black doesn't move the rook from g6, then I have a lot of pawns for just one piece. So black decided to play rook g to g7. Queen takes h6 check. So here we go. White has 7 protected passed pawns. Knight h7 is only defense. And then e5. I am starting to push my pawns and also opens the diagonal for my light squared bishop. The bishop is going to come to e4 and put pressure on h7. Another idea is to bring my knight via h5 to f6. Knight e7. Black is trying to bring this knight into defense, having in mind knight f5, knight g8 moves. And then the simple bishop e4. I'm covering the f5 square and preparing knight h5 f6 maneuver. He played bishop c4, bringing the bishop and covering the e6 square in case I'm going to jump to e6. But as I said, the knight may come from h5. So knight h5 was played. Rook g6. And now a small final combination in the Capablanca style. Queen takes h7. King takes h7, knight f6 check. Black has to move back, king h8, knight takes e8. So now white has 6 pawns for exchange, which is more than enough. Black played one more move, rook g8, and after knight f6, he resigned. In this game, you could see that after sacrificing some material, it's not really necessary to play quickly. Sometimes you can slowly improve your position and your opponent may collapse under pressure. And that's what happened in this game. Right after the end of the game, my opponent told me that he realized, and when he plays against me, he has to protect the f7 pawn. And it was really funny. And in fact, if you look at the starting position, the f7 pawn is the weakest point in the black's position. So in fact, it makes sense. Thanks everyone. This was Grandmaster Viktor Mikhalevsky.